The word decision comes from the Latin root that literally means to cut off every other option. Shout out to Alex Hormozi for that one. And that's exactly why most people struggle to decide. It's not fear of being wrong, it's fear of losing out on other options. Now, I've spent years studying how the world's top leaders make decisions when the answer isn't clear. Bezos, Musk, Jobs, not what they say after the fact, but how they decided when the pressure was high and the data was incomplete. Now, what I've learned is simple. High leverage leaders don't wait for clarity. They cut cleanly using frameworks and move forward while everyone else stays stuck, reopening the same choice. So in this video, I'm gonna break down how they think and translate those into decision-making methods into something you can actually use today. Specifically, there are 3 things that you're gonna learn in this video. First, what it really means to make a decision, not a preference, not a gut feeling, and not procrastination disguised as thinking, and why most people don't realize they're avoiding decisions while believing they're being careful. Second, a practical framework for making decisions when the answer isn't clear, the information is incomplete, and emotions are involved, because this is how high leverage leaders move forward without waiting for certainty. And third, how to stop making decisions based on who you are today and start making them from the perspective of who you're trying to become. This is the difference between reacting to the present and pulling your future self into today. So if you ever felt stuck between options, reopen the same decision over and over, or defaulted to gut feel because nothing felt right, this will give you the clarity and a way forward. Now, most people don't struggle with decisions because they're bad at thinking. They struggle because they don't actually decide. They hesitate, they gather more information, they ask for one more opinion, they wait for clarity to magically show up. But here's the part most people don't realize. And that is where that idea of cutting actually matters, right? Decision doesn't mean confidence, it means commitment. To decide isn't to feel confident, it's to eliminate the alternatives and move forward anyway. And this is where that gap starts to show up. High leverage leaders don't win because they're always right. And here's a simple way to see this. Think about health, right? An overweight person isn't overweight because they don't know what healthy food is. They're overweight because they're making decisions from an identity of an overweight person. You know, what to eat, when to work out, when to skip it, what feels hard, what feels optional. And most people get this backwards. They think I'll start making fit person decisions after I lose weight, but no one becomes fit that way. People get fit by making decisions as if they were already fit. They don't wait for the result to change their behavior. They change their behavior to become the results. And business works the exact same way. Most business owners make decisions from where they are right now, what feels safe and what feels urgent, what feels emotionally comfortable. But high leverage leaders make decisions from where they're going. They don't ask what feels right today. They ask, what would the person running the business I want to build decide right now? And that's the real shift, because the problem isn't effort. It's not intelligence. It's not access to information. It's that most people have no framework for cutting decisions cleanly when the answer isn't obvious. And that's why the world's best leaders don't rely on gut feeling alone. They use decision frameworks to reduce emotion, reduce hesitation, and reduce second guessing. And that's where we're breaking down. When the answer isn't clear, great leaders don't guess or wait. They classify, simplify, and decide from first principles. Let's walk through how that actually works. Most decisions feel hard for a reason, not because you're bad at deciding, but because 3 things usually are true at the same time. You don't have all the information, the stakes feel high, and emotions are involved. That combination makes the brain panic a little bit. So what do most people do in that situation? Well, they overthink, they delay, they avoid, or they default to a gut feel and call it intuition. And here's the key thing to understand. Frameworks don't matter when the answer is obvious. They matter when it's not. If the right move were clear, you wouldn't be here watching a video about decision making. So instead of trying to feel your way through uncertainty, the first move is to slow down and classify the decision. And this is where Jeff Bezos has one of the cleanest mental models ever. He separates decisions into 2 types.
Most decisions are 2-way doors. If you make the wrong decision, you walk out the door, you pick a door, you walk out, and you spend a little time there. It turns out to be the wrong decision. You can come back in and pick another door. Some decisions are so consequential and so important and so hard to reverse that they really are 1-way door decisions. You go in that door you're not coming back.
Two-way door decisions and one-way door decisions. A two-way door decision is reversible. If it doesn't work, you can always walk it back, right? Low long-term risk, low cost to undo, and these should essentially be made fast, often by one person or a very, very small team. One-way doors, on the other hand, the decision is different. It's really hard to undo. It's expensive to reverse, and it has high long-term impact, and those deserve slowing down, a little bit of escalation, and deeper thinking. So here's where most people mess this up. They treat every decision like a one-way door. So everything gets heavy, right? Everything gets debated and everything gets stuck. Bezos gave a great example of this, deciding the standard height of all Amazon warehouses. It's not sexy, very tactical, but once you build them, you can't just change that, right? So that right there is a one-way door. Compare that to something like changing a landing page or testing an offer or adjusting messaging. That right there is a two-way door. Treating both the same creates bottlenecks everywhere. And once you classify the decision, the next step becomes much clearer. Now, here's comes the Elon Musk layer.
I think it's also important to reason from first principles rather than by analogy. So the normal way that we conduct our lives is we reason by analogy. We're doing this because it's like something else that was done. Because it's kind of mentally easier to reason by analogy rather than from first principles. But by first principles is kind of a physics way of looking at the world. And what that really means is you kind of boil things down to the most fundamental truths and then reason up from there. That takes a lot more mental energy.
Most people reason by analogy. What is the other company doing? What worked before? What common mistakes are in the industry? Musk reasons from first principles. He asks, what must be true, right? What are the fundamental constraints, and what does the decision actually need to accomplish? Then from there, he builds up. Now, this matters most when the answer isn't obvious or clear, because first principle thinking strips away the noise. It removes assumptions you don't realize that you were carrying, and it reveals options that no one else is really looking at. And it prevents you from copying someone else's mistakes at a larger scale. The SpaceX example is a perfect illustration. Instead of buying expensive aerospace certified parts from wherever, and that's how it's been done, they broke the problem down into its core requirements. Well, they need strength, they need heat tolerance, they need performance. And once they knew what had to be true, they found cheaper, better solutions. So in business, this looks like asking, what does the decision actually need to solve? What constraints does it remove? What happens if I strip everything else away? But clarity alone isn't enough. You still need conviction. And this is where Steve Jobs comes in.
The only problem with Microsoft is they just have no taste. They have absolutely no taste. I don't mean that in a small way. I mean that in a big way. They don't think of original ideas, and they don't bring much culture into their product.
You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever. Because believing that the dots will connect down the road will give you the confidence to follow your heart, even when it leads you off the well-worn path. And that will make all the difference.
Jobs didn't optimize for consensus. He optimized for alignment with the vision, right? The taste, the design coherence, right? Long-term direction. When decisions felt unclear, the vision became the tiebreaker. This connects directly back to the identity idea that we talked about earlier. A fit person decision, future self decisions. The question becomes, does this move me closer to the person or the company that I'm becoming? And if not, when the data doesn't decide, the vision does, right? But vision without action still stalls, which brings us to speed. Now, General Patton said it best. A good plan violently executed today is a perfect plan executed next week. Great decision makers separate two phases, right? Deliberation and execution. They think hard up front, but once the decision is made, there's no half commitment, no endless revisiting, no second guessing every step, especially for two-way door decisions. And there's a quote that I really like that says, and I believe it was by Abraham Lincoln, if I had 6 hours to cut down a tree, I would spend the first 5 hours sharpening the axe. And that's why slow execution kills learning and fast execution creates instant feedback loops, which raises the modern question for most business owners that now face, how do you do this consistently without burning mental energy? Well, that's where AI fits in. Not as a decision maker and not as an authority and not even as a replacement for your own judgment. AI works best as a thought partner. This comes straight from the book, The AI-Driven Leader. AI reduces the cognitive load and it helps surface trade-offs like you might miss. It pressure tests assumptions and it explores second-order consequences for you. You just bring the judgment, you bring the standards, and you bring the vision. And AI will help you think clearer, faster, and with less emotional noise. It's a second brain during the thinking phase. It's not the final vote, but now you've got all of the pieces, and the real question is how you apply this in the right place, and that's where we go next. At this point, something should feel lighter, not because decisions got easier, but because they got clearer. You now understand why gut decisions fall apart under pressure and why the best leaders don't wait for certainty, why frameworks matter when the answer isn't obvious, and most importantly, why decisions are a form of leverage, because decisions don't just change outcomes, they change what you decide to work on in the first place. But here's the catch. Clear decisions aimed at low leverage areas still keep you busy, just more confidently busy. This is also where AI fits into the picture, not as a magic tool and not as the decision maker, but as the force multiplier after you understand what actually matters. If this has helped you think more clearly about how you go about decisions, the next thing you need to understand is where leverage actually comes from in modern business. Because before AI can create leverage, you have to know where leverage lives. Now, I broke all that down in another video called The AI Shift Every Business Will Have to Make in 2026. This video explains why old leverage models are breaking and where leverage is shifting now, and how AI changes structure, not just speed. Once you see that shift, your decisions stop feeling heavy and they start feeling obvious. So you can go watch that video right here next.